Okay, welcome everybody to the second session, or the afternoon. I'm really happy to introduce our first speaker, Annie Fee, who is a British Academy postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History at the University College of London. She has published extensively and been the recipient of numerous research grants, including the Entente Cordiale, am I saying that right? Okay. Scholarship, Cinémathèque Française Research Fellowship, and the Chester A. Fritz Scholarship, and most recently the HEFCE, Urban Research Award in Innovation and Leadership. She is currently developing an interactive historical map on the Parisian cinema culture and working on a book manuscript dealing with class and gender politics at play in the emergence of cinephilia in interwar France.
Thank you very much, Lise, for the introduction, and thank you very much to Daniela for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here today. So this research comes from my historical mapping project of Parisian cinemas in the 1920s, and I'm happy to also deal with questions that have to do with this wider project at the end of my talk too, when we get to Q&A. Okay, so cinephilia emerged in early 1920s France as a participative film culture grounded in a handful of luxury cinemas on the central boulevards of Paris and on the Champs-Élysées. And so since it is in these cinemas that cinephilia initially took root as an intellectual film culture catering to a cultural elite, we must ask ourselves who were the spectator participants of local film cultures in the over 100 working class cinemas across Paris. In order to counterbalance the effects of intellectual cinephilia on the cultural memory of French cinema going, I engaged with disparate, unpublished archival material, including fan letters and announcements in the leftist press. Using geographical data, I embed these sources spatially in order to ground working class spectatorship within local communities and workplaces. Now, the first wave of French filmmakers and critics in 1920s Paris used specialized film journals as their main vehicle of cultural formation. Because these filmmakers and critics such as Louis Deluc were both discussing film art and creating a new kind of community of cinema connoisseurs, journals such as Louis Deluc's Cinéa up here were crucial spaces for construction not just of cinephilia, but also by necessity cinephilia's other. Now, Deluc and others had to discursively construct the opposite of the elite public, that is, the Publique populaire, a public that happened to be overwhelmingly working class. And from this project also came the ossification of stereotypes of certain audience members, like the communist with the knife between his teeth, and gendered stereotypes like the starstruck midinette or young seamstress, the prostitute, the mother, the nanny and the concierge, all of whom were considered by cinephile critics to be representative and emblematic of the sorry state of unsophisticated French film audiences. And this is just to give you some cartoon representations of some of these figures from the time. On the left there, alors ma mignonne, on veut faire du cinéma, we're mocking the midinette, the young working class woman who would perhaps be naive enough to think this gent is going to help her get into the cinema and demand nothing in return, or these fellows who are looking for the concierge and she's gone to see the 43rd episode of an inexistent serial, The Bleeding Means, right? So making fun of these popular aspects of these melodramatic serials too. So due to the reliance on these cinephile texts, historians of French cinema culture have largely overlooked the central role that cinemas played in the development of working class consciousness during the interwar years. Caught between bourgeois anxieties about working class idleness and an emerging film intelligentsia that saw popular film serials as an unwholesome entertainment, neighbourhood cinemas have been relegated to the margins of French cultural historiography. Yet the difficult conditions of the wartime period transformed cinemas into vital spaces where working class men and women, marginalised by the years of war, created the conditions for their own integration into society. Wartime events made working class cinemas into far more than movie theatres. Popular films provided psychological relief for war-weary Parisians, but their reception was also conditioned by social and pragmatic semantics that the spaces in which they were screened accrued throughout the difficult war years. So, for example, on the night of 23rd of March 1915, residents of Montmartre used cinemas as shelters when they heard firemen sound the air raid alarm. Cinemas were not only psychological refuges from the trauma of war then, but also concrete refuges for the physical trauma of living in wartime Paris. In a wider sense, these cinemas can be seen as functioning as what I call a commons or a place publique, in which working class men and women, wounded veterans, families threatened by eviction, and housewives suffering from rising food prices carved out both space and time for leisure, rest, debate, protest, and collective decision-making. Popular cinemas thus became, working-class cinemas, cinéma populaire, thus became sites where Parisians seeking refuge from the traumas of war, the workplace, and economic difficulties blended working-class entertainment culture with social organisation in a common-sense way. By 1980, in the final year of the war, annual profits of cinemas had skyrocketed, as had the number of cinemas. Cinema owners had labour unions in part to thank for this sudden increase in cinema attendance. The General Confederation of Labour and Socialist Municipal Councillors succeeded in securing an 8-hour workday in April 1919, a victory that was partly won through mass meetings in Parisian cinemas. So as you can see here in the 18th arrondissement, 3 Socialist Party meetings were held on the morning of May Day 1919, before the protesters moved from the north in the 18th arrondissement down to central Paris with their protest. So once a certain measure of leisure time was secured, a circular process of self-reinforcement emerged as unionists transformed cinemas into not only spaces for leisure, but also spaces to fight for leisure, as well as a range of other demands. In direct response to this new audience, exhibitors sought to profit by building cinemas in working-class neighbourhoods of Paris, where men and women could spend their so-called 8 hours of play. Now let's take a look at the 18th arrondissement, and narrowing our focus into Montmartre here is useful for several reasons. First, by attending to the spatial organisation of cinemas, one can better understand the intersections of film culture with community activism. And on the left here, we have all of the cinemas in the 18th arrondissement, one peeking out there into the 9th. And then here we have cinemas in black, were the cinemas where political activism took place. Those were the cinemas that were multifunctional spaces, and the yellow cinemas were not used as multifunctional spaces. So we see that cinemas were located in close proximity to the workplace or marketplace and could be used strategically by local activists, thereby blurring the barrier between work and leisure. Second, the 18th arrondissement had the highest concentration of cinemas in Paris, with 23 cinemas in 1921. And third, post-war inflation and widespread evictions made Montmartre an extremely politically active, and the socialist and communist parties made it their stronghold, along with other prominent activist groups like the tenants and consumers associations. Factories surrounded this whole area in Batignolles to the west, outside the city limits to the north, and in La Chapelle to the east. Now the Cinéma Ordinaire, let me just say something about La Chapelle. So, in La Chapelle, this quartier that you see on the map here, gas plants stood back to back with the refineries further to the east in La Villette, and sociological maps of this city describe the quartier as a quartier ouvrier, a workers' neighbourhood. Due to the proximity of the Gare du Nord, many public service workers in the electricity, post, gas and public transport sectors lived in La Chapelle. The Cinéma Ordinaire on the corner here was the central cinema in a neighbourhood where the houses were black from soot from passing trains. Next door to the Cinéma Ordinaire lived the co-founder of the French Communist Party, Marcel Cachin. In this image we see Communist Party supporters waiting outside of his residence, with the cinema in the background here. Can you see on the top left, Cinéma Ordinaire? The sign is sort of poking out like that, right? So we can see the public waiting here outside the same cinema where they may have attended speeches delivered by Cachin, who was also their deputy or municipal councillor. So zooming in like this to the La Chapelle quartier reveals the spatial embeddedness of cinemas within local political identity. Here at the Palais Torcy on the top left, Marcel Cachin celebrated his victory as Socialist Party deputy in 1914 with an evening of cinema dances and speeches. And during the Great War, the same Torcy Palace became a soup kitchen where local women, Madame Faure, Madame Leroy, served up to 600 meals per day for refugees from northern France as well as for local people. So we see here that this spectator activist of post-war, interwar Montmartre really, cannot be reconciled with these negative stereotypes of the weepy female spectator, the overly engaged midinette who wants to be a star, or this angry communist, right? These stereotypes that were bandied around by cinephile critics in the first film criticism. So rather than obediently follow the usher's light into another universe cut off from everyday realities, these working class men and women in Montmartre used their local cinema as a space of protest and of collective action. Now, perhaps we can just consider one such cinema-centred protest across the railway lines from La Chapelle. During the summer, that social historian Tyler Stovall describes as one of, quote, widespread and dramatic working class discontent in the capital. So on 10th of August 1919, a vigilante group called the Montmartre League of Consumers organised a rally in the Cinema Ornano, after which 1,000 aggrieved housewives carried out a mini-revolution at the Ornano market just outside the cinema. And just a note, this is how the Cinema Ornano looks today on the Boulevard Ornano. So if you want a little historical tour of Parisian cinema, you can certainly have a look at that facade there. Okay, so during this tactical meeting at the Cinema Ornano, the president of the Consumer League informed the audience of housewives of the going rate for various fruit and vegetables and meat and dairy, so that they could then boycott shopkeepers and market sellers who raised their prices above these levels. At the end of the meeting, the women cast a vote in favour of the measures to be taken by this week-old organisation. Measures that included demanding that the government lower the farm gate price of foods and to apply the death penalty to profiteers. So after a general call for calm and for non-violence, the local women with their shopping baskets at the ready left the cinema and flowed out into the middle of the market, which ran the length of the Boulevard Ornano and still does. The parade of women followed the League's inspectors, who in turn were escorted by the police. They surrounded a market woman who was selling her cabbages, for example, for 30 centimes apiece. And after being told by the Price Watch Patrol that her cabbages were just too expensive, she didn't protest. She just changed her sign and said, "Go on, 4 pennies then, who wants some?" At that point, the ménagère activists jostled and pushed through to buy the reduced price cabbages. And after passing through the market and securing price cuts on cauliflowers and lettuces and potatoes and tomatoes and grapes, etc., the women were, quote, unable to hide their delight. The Cinema Ornano meeting had instigated what one journalist called a revolution at the Ornano market. So when the 1,000 determined activist housewives filled the cinema that day, they appropriated this space for their specific needs. As a privately owned space, the cinema was outside of government control, and its location on the same boulevard as the market enabled them to constitute themselves as a cohesive group defined by their relationship with that market. Perhaps this was why the Montmartre League of Consumers was the first and the largest in the city. Stovall indicates clearly that the food crisis of 1919 contributed to a real sense of revolutionary crisis, largely thanks to what he describes as aggrieved housewives who in this context could potentially bring down a government. The cinema, or nano then, was thus part of the ordinary citizen's common sense geography of Montmartre, a geography where men and women naturally joined together in cinemas, not just to enjoy films, but also as resistive consumers, right? And this is just to give you an idea too of the location of the cinema Ornano compared to the central bus depot and workshops, because the cinema Ornano, although I'm not talking about it here, was also used by the transport unions because of how practical it was, considering it was right next to those workshops there. So another example of a tactical and common sense use of cinemas in Montmartre can be seen just down the street from the cinema Ornano in a separate commercial hub that revolved around the vast Magasin du Fayel department store. Now, although the cinema habits of ordinary people, and especially ordinary working class people in the 1920s, very hard to trace, luck has it that a collection of fan letters held at the Cinémathèque Française contains a letter sent in 1921 from a group of young women working at this department store. And the letter is sent to the gourmand actress Sandra Milovanov, who at the time was playing in a film serial called Les Deux Gamines. So here's the letter from these shop girls. Madame, please don't be indifferent toward a little trio of young girls who, being fervent admirers of their little Jeanette, the name of the character in the film, would be very satisfied and happy if you could give them the great pleasure of visiting them in their workplace at the Palais de la Nouveauté, is another name for the Magasin du Fayel, in the fashion department, and where at the same time you will find delicious surprises. With best wishes of friendship from three little madwomen to a petite folle. In the case that your visit is impossible, please be so kind as to write us a little note with some advice on how to get into the movies. So this letter gives us a glimpse into an intimate, a personal and aspirational dimension of film culture that is too often overlooked when we seek to understand the history of French cinema through the public and the intellectual lens of the first wave critics. But placing the letter in its socio-geographical context also reveals a public and sometimes even political dimension of participative film culture that has been equally overlooked. For example, it's likely that René, Georgette and Simone, our shop girls, would walk across the boulevard to watch Milovanov's serial, a serial which the cinephile critics look down on as popular, frivolous, awful entertainment, at the Barbès Palace, which we see in the big black mark here. So the Barbès Palace was a 1,200 seat first run cinema on the Boulevard Barbès. It was built in 1914, and it was the central cinema for this, very vibrant neighbourhood life, not just as a distraction on days off, but also as a rallying place in times of need. Its location opposite the Magasin du Fayel department store meant that workers like René, Georgette and Simone could hurry across the Boulevard Barbès for an evening film programme. And yes, this is how the Barbès Palace looks today. You can go and visit it at 34 Boulevard Barbès. It's now a shoe shop. And they have the original mouldings and the stage. They don't allow you to take pictures. I think they're very scared of having their shop closed down and someone might restore it. So there we go. So these girls could cross the boulevard for their evening entertainment, but the communist newspaper L'Humanité informs us that the cinema's proximity also made it the perfect gathering point for these same workers during labour disputes. In June 1919, Magasin du Fayel workers held 4 separate meetings in the Cinema Palace. The Parisian Region Federation of Employees called a meeting on 1st of June 1919 following reports of general abusive behaviour by store management and one report of unfair dismissal. And at this meeting, employees established a list of demands that were handed on to delegates from their union. The meeting triggered the most important strike action by the employees' union during the interwar period. And 2 weeks later, on 15th of June 1919, 1,200 employees, exactly the same amount of seats in the Barbès Palace, male and female employees from all departments of the Magasin du Fayel store, voted unanimously on a list of demands within the Cinema Palace. So addressing spatiality and micro-locality thus reveals how, in the 1920s, the act of going to the cinema could assume various significations, depending on whether it took place in Montmartre, as we see here, or on a central boulevard in the entertainment district close to the Opéra. Cinemas of the Central Entertainment District catered to a bourgeois clientele and wealthy foreigners, and it is in these cinemas that intellectual cinephilia initially took root. By looking beyond cinephile text to period newspapers, historical maps, and fan mail, for example, the spectator participants in local working class film cultures emerged to give a wider picture of 1920s cinema culture. And by virtue of the working class nature of their quartier, these men and women attended cinemas that were also community spaces with multifunctional existences. The cinemas that were central to them as weekly sites of adoration of their favourite actors and actresses like Sandra Milovanov were also used for political and trade union meetings, community fundraisers, concerts with local youth choirs and trade union meetings, as well as beauty pageants for local girls. So reconstructing this culture is a crucial step towards recuperating a wider sphere of fan sociability in which film culture merged seamlessly with these types of non-filmic activities, as well as festival parades, newspaper serialized stories, music hall performances, and political activism. Thank you very much.